Why does this single image make him the most ruthless father to a rapist?
Now this is for your penis, but we'll get to that later. Scalpel. For your eyelids, in case you insist on fucking shutting them. You see, I know what it feels like to be helpless. Just like when I watched you slaughter my whole family. You can't fight fate, right, Darby?
Clyde thoughtfully set up a mirror above, so the guy could watch the whole process of his own execution. A photo of Clyde's wife and daughter is on the mirror. He wants them to witness the entire punishment of the wicked. Once everything is ready, Clyde puts on his helmet, turns on the camera, and next is the delightful showtime. This movie, directed by the famous F. Gary Gray and starring Gerard Butler, is an epic revenge thriller. It scored a high 8.0 from over 100,000 people. When the law fails to bring justice to the innocent, when evil can escape punishment through a flawed system, then all an ordinary person can do is to use his own methods to take back the justice that belongs to him. Now, let us see how Gerard Butler hones his blade for 10 years to perfectly demonstrate what it means to say, revenge is a dish best served cold. 10 years ago, two thugs broke into his house to rob the defenseless Clyde, was struck hard and fell to the ground. His hands were firmly tied behind his back. A sharp knife pierced his stomach. In the despair of being conscious but powerless to fight back, he was forced to watch the entire tragedy unfold. His beautiful wife was brutally assaulted to death, and he watched helplessly as the inhuman demon reached out for his 5-year-old daughter. At this moment, Clyde was engulfed by endless despair and pain. A happy family was destroyed just like that. Later, the two criminals were caught. He pinned his hopes on the law, hoping it would punish those two demons. But the law did not give him justice. It only sentenced Darby to 3 years in prison. Because in the US at that time, the Constitution had already become a stepping stone for certain judicial elites to climb higher, and the so-called democracy and freedom leaned more towards those scumbags who knew how to exploit legal loopholes. The rising star prosecutor Nick was extremely ambitious, with an astonishing 95% win rate. He was the one handling this case at the time. He could have put both criminals on death row, but to maintain his high win rate, he actually agreed to a plea deal with a defense lawyer. Then, he told Clyde that the main culprit Darby agreed to turn state witness to testify against his accomplice. Based on the evidence currently held, the accomplice would be sentenced to death, while Darby would be charged with third-degree murder with a sentence of 3 years. Clyde could not accept this result at all. He personally witnessed his wife and daughter brutally murdered by them. But the opposing lawyer made a big fuss about him being severely injured and on the verge of passing out at the time, pointing out his testimony lacked credibility. If that was really the case, even if Clyde went to court, the jury would not believe his words, which could also lead to both thugs being acquitted. So Nick suggested that instead of this risk, it was better to punish at least one of them. Clyde felt his heart turn to ashes instantly. Was this the justice in Nick's heart? The right and wrong that anyone could distinguish? Yet he didn't have the slightest courage to uphold. In the end, Darby only got a 3-year prison sentence. The accomplice was sentenced to death with a 10-year stay after the trial ended. The murderer Darby arrogantly shook hands with prosecutor Nick, even joking about how great such a judicial system was. Nick hated this kind of scumbag, but was completely helpless against them. And this entire scene was witnessed by Clyde, since the civilization of the law no longer existed. Then he would use brutal methods to deliver justice. In the blink of an eye, 10 years passed. The accomplice's execution day arrived. He was strapped to the lethal injection chair. The medical examiner inserted the injection needle into his body and wrapped the straps. Nick was also present to witness this execution. At the warden's command, 2 medical examiners activated the switch simultaneously. As the 3 drugs were slowly injected, the accomplice, who was supposed to be euthanized peacefully, suddenly convulsed violently, letting out an incredibly agonizing scream. Then blood continuously seeped out from his skin. Obviously, this completely violated the principle of euthanasia. Someone deliberately replaced the mild euthanasia drug with a highly toxic chemical that corrodes organs. Such a blatant murder immediately triggered a police investigation. They quickly discovered that the drugs injected at the scene had long been swapped. And even more bizarrely, a message was left on it saying, "You cannot fight fate." This instantly reminded prosecutor Nick of a case from 10 years ago, where the main culprit, Darby, once stood in court and said the exact same words to him.
I mean, you can't fight fate, right?
Immediately, the police set out to arrest Darby. At the same time, Darby was watching TV at home. When he saw his former accomplice executed instead of him, he actually laughed out loud like a pig right there. But suddenly, an unknown call came in, telling him to quickly look out the window, because the police had already started coming for him. If he did not want to be caught, he had to follow the caller's instructions. Darby quickly put on his clothes, followed the mysterious person's instructions to run to the roof, fired a few shots at the police car, then wiped the fingerprints off the gun and threw it away. The mysterious person had prepared a police car for him at an abandoned factory. The escape cop had already been stunned unconscious. He carefully opened the car door. Seeing the guy was indeed out cold, Darby snatched the service weapon and dragged the cop, forcing the guy to take him to a safe place. After shaking off the pursuit, Darby had no intention of letting the guy go. Just as he raised the gun to silence him, the phone rang again. What he absolutely never expected was, the cop in front of him was actually the mysterious person.
You know why I'll never see my wife, the little girl, again?
He removed his disguise, revealing his true face. By the time Darby reacted, it was too late. The mechanism on the gun handle was coated with pufferfish toxin. The dose was just right, paralyzing but not brain damaging, making him completely lose the ability to resist while still letting him deeply feel everything that was happening. After enduring for 10 years, he finally got his chance. Blood must be paid with blood. Then he secured Darby on the operating table. Next, he injected a measured amount of saline to prevent the guy from dying midway, and even thoughtfully set up a monitor to observe his heart rate in real time. Then came the most crucial adrenaline. He had to make him enjoy the upcoming masterpiece together, absolutely not allowing the guy to miss a single detail. He was going to let Darby properly experience that feeling of absolute despair and helplessness. Just like when he personally witnessed his wife and daughter die horribly back then, he also placed a huge mirror right above the guy, and on the mirror were photos of his wife and daughter. The purpose was to let his wife and daughter witness this revenge with their own eyes. After all of this was completely ready, he turned on the camera to record his entire creative process. A few days later, when the police finally found Darby in the abandoned factory, he had already been neatly chopped into 66 pieces. The scene was simply too gruesome to look at. Even seasoned detectives with 30 years of experience could not help but gasp in shock. Nick discovered through records that the factory where Darby was dismembered was Clyde's property, and the guy was a mechanical engineer who held numerous patents. A few years ago, he sold off most of his assets and bought up industrial properties in the suburbs. And since Darby was the primary culprit who killed his wife, Nick concluded that the guy was a suspect in a revenge kill. Subsequently, the police immediately moved to arrest him, but Clyde had anticipated this move long ago. He had absolutely no intention of resisting or escaping. Before the police arrived, he stripped himself completely naked, exposing himself bare to the police guns, because this way he wouldn't get hurt during the arrest. Seeing Clyde being caught, Nick actually felt quite surprised. Could a 10-year scheme result in just surrendering without a fight and rotting in prison? Of course not, because this good show of revenge was only just truly beginning. Later, Nick found at his residence a lot of books about the law. Every single one was a professional book that only top-tier lawyers with years of practice would study. And pinned on the wall was a newspaper clipping of Nick shaking hands with Darby 10 years ago. Without a doubt, Clyde was the killer, but they still needed him to confess personally, so Nick planned to have a good talk with him to gain the guy's trust. He voluntarily turned off all the surveillance cameras and tried to buddy up using his own identity as a father, even expressing admiration and understanding for what he did, adding that those kinds of demons deserved to be killed long ago. Clearly, Nick was very good at emotionally resonating with criminals. With all this groundwork laid, next came the confession phase. Nick cut straight to the point, asking him if he murdered Darby. Clyde stated, "I wanted him dead. He killed my wife and daughter." Then asked if he was the one who swapped the drugs and killed the accomplice. Clyde frankly said they all deserved to die, Through a series of leading questions, Nick quickly recorded all the details in the transcript. Clearly, this efficiency in handling cases was very high, but he had underestimated the man sitting before him. Clyde told him to cancel all his recent schedule because he was going to be insanely busy soon. Nick did not understand why. Clyde stopped beating around the bush. Because all his admissions just now were hypothetical, it was just a word game he was playing. He had never admitted to personally killing anyone from start to finish. Nick finally realized this man was not simple, but he was very good at making deals with criminals, just like that trial from 10 years ago. Clyde bluntly stated he wanted a brand new mattress because the prison bed was too hard and only then would he be willing to confess. Nick saw that he was playing tricks and left the interrogation room without looking back. However, the district attorney thought this deal was worth it. One mattress in exchange for a criminal's confession. But Nick knew the guy was intentionally being cryptic. They could not let themselves be led by the nose. Right at that moment, a colleague told Nick to call home immediately. Through the phone call with his wife, he learned that just 2.5 hours ago, his daughter received a package. Thinking it was just a regular DVD, his daughter curiously opened it to watch, and the content inside gave the little girl a lifelong trauma. Nick then realized this was Clyde's doing, but the man in the video was wearing a mask, which meant there was no proof of who the killer really was. Ultimately, Nick chose to compromise. Soon, guards carried a brand new mattress into the prison. This also caused dissatisfaction among other inmates. The warden warned Clyde, "Having nice things in here is not a good thing." On the other side, Susan reviewed a massive amount of files and learned that Clyde had no fixed address for the last 10 years, but he had received contract payments from the Department of Defense. Additionally, he bought 9 real estate properties and then transferred these assets under a company name in Panama. Since the two countries had no mutual legal assistance treaty, they could not check the corresponding addresses, but Nick ordered them to find out no matter what. The guy hiding properties definitely had an ulterior motive. The next day in court, Clyde not only waived his right to an attorney, but also insisted on representing himself, and even applied for bail. Nick hoped the judge would not let the suspect out of prison, but he did not have any solid evidence at all. According to constitutional laws, before the prosecution obtains valid evidence, the suspect has the right to be granted bail. Clyde cited multiple past cases as precedent and stated he was eligible for bail application. Nick was completely powerless to refute this. Even the judge agreed with his view, but just as the judge was about to announce the bail approval in court, Clyde suddenly changed his tune entirely.
Thank you.
Excuse me?
No, I don't think I will excuse you. You see, this is what I'm talking about. You were about to let me go. Are you kidding me? This is why we're here in the first place. You think I don't remember who you are, Lee?
I would tread carefully, Mr. Shelton.
Well, how carefully should I tread? Because apparently, I just killed 2 people. And you were about to let me walk right out that door. How misguided are you? I feed you a couple of bullshit legal precedents, and there you go. You jump on it like a bitch and eat. You folks, you all hang out in the same
Mr.
little
Shelton,
club.
you
and
will
every
be held
day
in
you let
contempt of this
madmen and
court.
murderers back on the street. You're too busy treating the law like it's a
One more
fucking
time.
assembly line.
One
You
more
have any
time.
idea what justice
You
is?
are now
Whatever
in
happened to right and
contempt of
wrong?
court.
Jesus
Remove
Christ,
this
whatever
man
happened to
from
right
my
and
court.
wrong?
The judge was so angry he slammed his gavel hard and publicly rejected his bail request. Little did they know this was all exactly as Clyde planned. Afterward, Nick went to the prison again, and Clyde did not go back on his word. Confessing all the details of personally killing the 2 men, Nick finally breathed a sigh of relief, because once a criminal confesses to the details, it is almost impossible to get away with it. But what he never expected was, the guy never intended to get away with it at all. He wanted to use another case to make a deal with Nick, and this time, he wanted a medium premium tomahawk steak. The bargaining chip was the lawyer Reynolds, who defended Darby 10 years ago. An investigation revealed that Reynolds had indeed been missing for 3 days. It seemed the guy really had leverage to negotiate. Clyde told Nick, at exactly 1 p.m., he wanted to see a hot steak. If the time passes, he could not guarantee Reynolds' life. Soon, a food cart drove into the prison. After rigorous inspection and confirming it was safe, it was allowed inside. But the warden was sick of these guys doing whatever they pleased on his turf. So he deliberately delayed the security process by the time the food reached the cell. It was already 8 minutes past the deadline. Since you guys are so unpunctual, Clyde leisurely started enjoying the delicious meal. After keeping everyone in suspense for long enough, he finally gave Nick a set of coordinates. Nick immediately took a helicopter to the location, but when they opened the box, inside was only a still warm corpse. The medical examiner found that Reynolds' time of death was exactly 8 minutes ago, not a second off. Everything was planned flawlessly by Clyde. However, Clyde's plan was far from over. He warmly invited his cellmate to share the food. After finishing the steak, he quietly hid the bone. And then, while the cellmate was not looking, savagely stabbed the guy in the carotid artery. Blood sprayed out violently, instantly staining the entire cell red. After taking care of his cellmate, he comfortably lay down on his bed, waiting for all the guards to rush in. He even requested a hot shower. This made the warden furious, and he immediately threw him into a dark, damp, solitary confinement cell. Several encounters, all ending in total defeat. This made Nick feel extremely frustrated. At this time, Susan told him she secretly investigated through a friend and found an agent who had worked with Clyde to understand the situation. The agent said, without exaggeration, Clyde is a king-tier assassin. Other assassins just kill normally. But Clyde specializes in killing from a distance. He schemes within the command tent and wins battles 1,000 miles away. The Defense Department has many targets they want dead but cannot kill, and Clyde can take them out easily. Everything he does has a profound purpose. He will always be several steps ahead of everyone else. So, killing his cellmate was all part of his calculated steps. In short, one sentence: if you want to close the case, the best way is to put a bullet in him immediately. Realizing the guy was an extremely dangerous figure, Nick hurried to find the judge for help, hoping he could approve restricting Clyde's activities to prevent him from contacting anyone. Although this severely violated human rights, the judge still agreed to sign it. But just as he finished signing the document, a phone call suddenly came in saying hello.
Hello? Oh my God.
The man was clearly inside a heavily guarded prison, yet he could manage to kill from afar. First, he eliminated the lawyer who defended the bad guys from thousands of miles away. And then he blew the head off a corrupt judge with no bottom line. Nick's face turned pale with fear instantly. He never expected that someone locked in prison could actually pull off remote assassinations. Nick concluded the guy must definitely have accomplices outside. Then he went to the cell once again. He asked Clyde if he was done playing games. Even for revenge, he should know when to stop. Clyde was extremely furious if he just wanted revenge. He could have done it 10 years ago. He could even effortlessly wipe out Nick's entire family. This instantly made Nick feel a lingering fear. He said, regarding the case, 10 years ago, he had already tried his absolute best, and he was just fulfilling his duties at the time. But what he did not know was, everything Clyde was doing was exactly to correct this mindset of his, and even to correct this country's rotten judicial system to the core. Even if there were sacrifices, it was unavoidable. He issued a final ultimatum to Nick. By 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, he must drop all charges against him. Otherwise, he would kill every single justice official. Nick was half doubting his words, but for safety reasons, he still moved his office into the prison overnight because security here was incredibly tight. Even with accomplices, they could not break in. Soon, the time was approaching 6. Everyone wore a heavy expression, as if facing a formidable enemy. Finally, the clock struck exactly 6, and everyone was completely safe and sound. They all breathed a sigh of relief. But Nick still felt a subtle sense of worry. However, just as everyone was about to leave, a series of car explosions suddenly occurred. Except for Nick and the district attorney, not a single justice official present survived. After investigating, his colleagues' cars had all been rigged with bombs. Yet only Nick's car was perfectly clean. Clearly, the killer was saving him for last. Such a severe and vicious incident occurring also drew high-level attention from the mayor. But the tragic part was, even though they knew exactly who the killer was, they were completely helpless against him. At this point, Nick promised the mayor he would absolutely not let the killer hurt anyone else. But he still handed his family over to police protection. When he returned home, he actually found an extra picture frame on the table. Inside was the newspaper clipping of him shaking hands with Darby. This instantly sent chills down Nick's spine, so he quickly used his authority to bring Clyde outside. Before the guy could even speak, A furious Nick viciously punched him a few times. He scolded the guy for being entirely inhuman, taking away so many innocent lives. He warned the guy not to continue making mistakes and killing. But to Clyde, these things were merely appetizers, and the truly spectacular show was just beginning. He wanted to make the whole rotten judicial system collapse entirely 2.5 days later. Just as the Justice Department held a funeral for the fallen officials, all the high-ranking figures were present. But right when everyone was preparing to leave, a heavy machine gun had already locked onto them, firing countless bullets wildly like rain. Several high-ranking judicial officials were shot to pieces on the spot, and among them was Nick's mentor, the district attorney who single-handedly brought him into the system and treated him so well.
Please, listen to me!
The district attorney was cremated right where he stood. The mayor officially announced the entire city immediately entered the highest state of emergency, locking down the whole city, implementing 24-hour militarized management. All armed police forces strictly patrolled every corner of the city, launching an around-the-clock high alert. But what was absurd and ridiculous was the target making the whole city act as if facing a great enemy was actually an inmate who had long been locked in prison. Next, the overwhelmed Nick started gathering all relevant information, day and night, then stop. Finally, from Clyde's property purchase list, he found an absolutely crucial clue. Clyde actually had a property located right near the prison, so Nick immediately drove there. They pried open the door and shockingly discovered a secret passage inside. It was not only stacked with a massive amount of weapons and ammo, but also over a dozen uniforms corresponding to different identities. Pasted on the wall were architectural blueprints of the prison. Dozens of monitors surrounding them were monitoring every single move inside the prison. It was simply a fully equipped command center. What they expected, even less, was the end of the secret passage, actually connected directly to every solitary confinement cell in the prison. So, this was the reason he intentionally got himself thrown into solitary. This way, he could come and go freely to kill from afar. They followed the ladder up to Clyde's room, but by this time, he was already nowhere to be found. And at this exact moment, Clyde, disguised as a cleaner, had already swaggered right into the City Hall building. After reaching the target location, he started assembling the explosive package. Then he returned to his vehicle and turned on the monitor to check the situation inside the conference room. And in the conference room at this moment, those attending were all the top-ranking figures of the nation's judicial agencies. Clearly, he intended to cremate all these guys to thoroughly destroy this rotten judicial system. However, Nick inside the tunnel had also discovered his plan. Not only were monitors pointing at the City Hall building, but there was also a cleaning checklist. This instantly gave Nick a bad feeling. He immediately located that bomb and contacted the bomb squad experts to prepare to defuse the crisis. But the bomb was connected to a landline phone. The moment a call came through, it would detonate instantly. The power was enough to level the entire building to the ground, and they also could not evacuate the mayor and everyone upstairs. Because the second Clyde in front of the monitor noticed something off, he would detonate it immediately. At this moment, Nick suddenly thought of a plan. First, he had traffic police set up inspection roadblocks at every intersection to intentionally delay Clyde's time. When he followed the secret passage back to his cell, he found that Nick had already been waiting for a long time. Clyde froze for a moment. Then a complex smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Nick pulled out a handgun, urging him to put the phone down. Bombing the city hall might draw the government's attention, but it would not bring his wife and daughter's lives back. But he already had no road left to turn back on, unless Nick wanted to make one more deal.
So what do you suggest, Nick? Make another deal? One final offer, is that what it is? I don't make deals with murderers anymore, Clyde. You told me that.
Hearing this, Clyde nodded with relief. The guy finally understood the bottom line of justice. His 10 years of painstaking planning had not been in vain, after all.
Well done. Bravo. Maybe I wasn't such a bad teacher after all.
Clyde hesitated no more and decisively dialed a string of numbers. Seeing this, Nick quickly stepped out of the room and locked the cell door tight. The passage entrance on the other side was also blocked dead. At this time, a ringing sound came from under the bed. Looking at the locked briefcase, Clyde showed absolutely no panic. He calmly sat down on the bed and took out his daughter's handcrafted bracelet that she gave him. Accompanied by the spreading roaring fire, very soon their family would be able to reunite once again, and this was perhaps also a kind of release for him. He used blood to defend the justice in his heart, and used his life to teach Nick never to bow down to evil forces. The description in the movie might be somewhat extreme, but in real life, almost everyone might encounter the exact same situation. Being oppressed by authority, being bullied by evil forces, unable to defend oneself, with nowhere to seek help. Many people have deeply felt this kind of helplessness, but those who dare to stand up and fight back are very few, simply because in front of that power, we are as insignificant as ants. The movie does not just tell a revenge story, but rather reflects the current social system. Neither Clyde nor Nick was wrong. Nick was just fulfilling his required duties, and although Clyde's methods were radical, it was to protect his family's rights. It was so that millions of families just like his would not repeat the same tragedy. The only ones wrong were those who despised justice. Although the ending was not very perfect, after Clyde's wife and daughter died, his life only had despair and hatred left. In the end, he used his own death to exchange for a prosecutor who defends justice, letting the public have hope that justice can be served. Thank you all for your patience in watching. I am 60 Clock Movie Review, dedicated to telling every story well. We will see you next time.